She signed the divorce papers with a pen that wasn't even hers. He handed it to her, cold, unbothered, like he was closing a business deal, not ending a marriage. What neither of them knew was that somewhere across the world, a woman with my exact face was about to change everything. Stay with me until the end, because the truth that comes out near the finish line of this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about identity, family, and second chances. If this story hits you, hit that subscribe button. I promise, every story here is one you have never heard before. I remember the exact sound of that Saturday morning. Not an argument, not shouting, just the soft, almost polite sound of paper sliding across a kitchen table. Victor set them down right next to my coffee cup, 2 inches away, like he had measured it, and then he straightened up, fixed the collar of his shirt, and said, "I think you already know it's time." That was it. 9 years. 9 years of building a life around a man who always made me feel like I was one step away from being asked to leave. Not cruel, mind you. Victor was never cruel. He was something worse. He was indifferent. And indifferent, I have learned, does more damage than cruelty ever could. Because at least cruelty means the other person is still feeling something. I did not cry in front of him. I want you to understand that clearly, because it matters. I sat there for a moment, looked at those papers, picked up his pen, a heavy silver thing that probably cost more than my first month's rent, and I signed. Every page. Clean. Then I slid the pen back across the table without a word. I went to our bedroom, packed 1 suitcase. I took my apron, the old linen one I have used since my first day in my bakery, and my grandmother's ring. A small gold band with a chip of a garnet, worth almost nothing, worth everything. And I walked out. Victor did not follow me to the door. I heard him on a phone call before I even reached the hallway. Business, probably, or someone else. I decided that day that it did not matter. What I did not know, what I could not have possibly known, was that the act of walking out that door was not the end of my story. It was the first sentence of a completely different one. The room I rented was above a laundromat on a street that smelled permanently of warm fabric and detergent. The ceiling fan squeaked in a slow, uneven rhythm. Not quite music, but almost. I named it Gerald. You have to find something to laugh at when there is not much else going. My bakery, Nadia's, was 3 blocks away. I had opened it 6 years before the divorce, during a phase when Victor was traveling too much and I needed something that was entirely mine. It was small. 8 tables, a glass display case that fogged up every morning, and a back kitchen that was barely wider than my arm stretched out. But it was mine. Every single thing in it was mine. The divorce settlement gave me just enough to keep it running for 3 more months. Victor's lawyers had been thorough. But 3 months, I decided, was enough time to either rebuild or go down trying. I chose to believe I was not the
Every morning I was there before sunrise, and every morning Mrs. Petra came through the door at exactly 7:45. She was a Bosnian woman in her late 70s who wore the same 2 cardigans on rotation and never once in 6 years ordered anything other than walnut rolls and black coffee. She was my first customer when I opened, and she had never missed a day she was in the city. On my first morning back after the divorce, she walked in, looked at me for a long moment, really looked the way older women do when they see through everything, and she said nothing. She just reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. When she left, the tip she placed on the table was triple the bill. I stood there for a full minute before I could move again. 2 weeks into my new routine, a strange envelope arrived at the bakery. There was no return address. Inside was a single photograph, printed on regular paper, like someone had done it at home, of a woman standing in front of rows and rows of grapevines, green hills behind her, stone buildings in the distance. She was wearing a dark blazer, hair pulled back, a clipboard under one arm. She looked exactly like me. Not similar, not like a cousin or a distant relative with shared bone structure. Exactly, like a mirror that had gone somewhere without me. On the back of the photo, written in small, careful handwriting, "You should know she exists." I stood behind my counter in my apron for a very long time, just looking at that photograph. I told myself it was a prank, someone playing games. I told myself that because the alternative, that it was real, was too enormous to hold standing up. So I tucked it under the counter, went back to my dough, and spent the rest of that day pretending I had not seen it. But that face, I could not get that face out of my mind. The second letter came 2 weeks later. This time there was a name, Renata Vieira, port wine producer, Porto, Portugal, and one line beneath it, "She has been looking for you longer than you have been looking for yourself." I sat down, right there on the floor of the kitchen, next to the oven, still in my flour-dusted apron. I sat down because my legs simply stopped working. Here is something I have never told anyone. I always knew I was adopted. My parents, both gone now, within 2 years of each other, had told me when I was 7. They were good people, honest people, and they gave me a beautiful life, but they never spoke about where I came from, not once. And I told myself for 34 years that I did not need to know, that the question did not live in me. It lived in me every single day. I ordered a DNA ancestry test that same afternoon. Then came the 3 longest weeks of my life. I baked more than I ever had. I reorganized the storage room twice. I repainted the small chalkboard menu, even though nothing on it had changed. I was waiting. I just did not know what I was waiting for. The result came on a Tuesday morning. A 99.97% sibling match. Same birth date, same hospital, same city, same mother. I had a twin sister. The report told me what the science knew. What it could not tell me, what I had to piece together slowly, painfully over the following days, was
Why had we been separated? Why had no one ever come for me? The answer, when it came, was both simpler and more heartbreaking than anything I had imagined. Our biological mother was 19 years old when she had us. 19. She could not care for 2 babies alone, and so she made the only choice she felt she had. She gave one of us up for adoption. That was me. Renata stayed with our mother's older aunt, a woman named Celeste, who ran a vineyard in the Douro Valley. Then, barely a year later, our mother disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. I bought the cheapest flight to Porto I could find. It had a layover in Madrid and departed at 5 in the morning. I packed a bag, told Mrs. Petra I would be away a few days, and she handed me an extra walnut roll wrapped in paper, like she was sending me off to war. Maybe she was. The taxi driver told me that Quinta das Almas, Soul's estate, was the most respected wine property in the entire Douro Valley. He said it like he expected me to already know this. I nodded like I did. I saw her before she saw me. She was standing between rows of vines, talking to 2 workers, holding a clipboard the same way the woman in the photograph had held it. Same posture, same tilt of the head when she was listening. The morning light was behind her, and I remember thinking, I genuinely thought for one strange second, that I was looking at a version of myself that had lived a completely different life, a version that had stayed, a version that had been chosen. Then she looked up. She went completely still. The workers followed her gaze and found me standing at the edge of the path, a small bag over my shoulder, absolutely frozen. And Renata, my sister, my twin, this woman I had never once met, walked toward me the way you walked toward something you were not sure is real. She stopped about a meter away. We stared at each other. Then she pulled me into a hug so tight I could not breathe, and I did not want her to let go. We stood there in that vineyard, 2 strangers who had never been strangers, and we cried. We cried for all the years, for every birthday that passed without the other one there, for a mother who left without telling either of us why. I stayed for 3 days, and in those 3 days, Renata told me everything. Aunt Celeste had raised her here, in this place, in these vines. She had been a hard woman, but a loving one, and when she died 5 years ago, she had left everything to Renata. The land, the estate, the business. At that point, it was valued at around 40 million euros. 40 million. I said the number out loud, and it felt like a word in a language I did not speak. But it was what Renata said quietly over dinner on the second night that stopped my heart completely. She looked at me across the table, turned her wineglass slowly in her hands, and said, "Celeste left it to me, but in her will there is a clause. She wrote it years before she died. It says that half of this estate belongs to the other daughter of our mother. She knew about you, Nadia. Celeste always knew you existed." I stared at her. She always knew. And I thought, I did not think about the money. I want to be clear about that. I thought, someone knew I was out there. Someone knew. And no one came. For 34 years, no one came. That sentence hurt in a way I had no name for. On the 3rd morning, we met with Renata's estate lawyer, an old, quiet man named Mr. Fonseca, who wore the same gray suit every day and spoke like he was measuring every word before releasing it. He told us there was a second sealed envelope, one that Aunt Celeste had left with specific instructions. It was only to be opened if both sisters were ever in the same room. In all the years since Celeste's death, that moment had never come. Until now. Mr. Fonseca placed the envelope on the table between us and stepped back. Renata looked at me. I nodded. She opened it. Inside was a letter in Celeste's handwriting, careful, small letters that leaned slightly to the right. I will not read you every word, because some of it was too private, too painful, too much ours to share completely. But I will tell you the part that changed everything. Our mother, Celeste wrote, had not simply chosen to leave. She had been paid to leave. By a man Celeste referred to only by his initials, HV. A man who had been involved with our mother briefly, who had panicked when she had twin daughters, and who had made the problem disappear the way powerful men have always made problems disappear, with money and silence. He had paid our mother enough to walk away from everything, including us, and had arranged for the adoption quietly so that no connection could ever be traced back to him. I read those initials twice, and then something cold and very slow moved through me. Victor's father's name was Enrique Vasconcelos. I pulled out my phone. I searched quietly while Renata watched me. The dates matched. The city matched. The industry. Hotel properties, real estate. A fortune built from hospitality. Matched. Enrique Vasconcelos had been exactly the kind of man Celeste described. Wealthy, connected, untouchable. The kind of man who moved through the world without consequences. He had died 8 years ago. Victor had inherited everything. I sat there in that office in Porto, in the vineyard his grandfather's money had helped destroy, and I understood something I had never expected to understand. The man whose family had made me feel like I never truly belonged had been the reason I never truly had a family to begin with. Victor himself did not know, I am certain of that. He is many things, but he is not a man who could carry a secret that dark and still sleep in Egyptian cotton sheets and feel nothing. Some guilt shows. His never did, which means he never had it. But his inheritance, the money, the hotels, the comfortable life he had handed me and then taken back, it was built, at least in part, on a foundation that included the destruction of everything I had come from. Karma, I have found, does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it just sits down across from you in a lawyer's office in Portugal and slides an envelope across the table. Renata reached over and held my hand. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would have fit inside language. After a long silence, she asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I, the woman who had signed divorce papers without flinching, who had smiled at customers all week while her life was falling apart, who had named a broken ceiling fan Gerald just to keep from crying, I finally, completely let go. I wept. Not quietly, not politely. The way you cry when something has been held in for 34 years and the dam finally gives all at once. And for the first time in my life, I was not alone when I did it. We made our decision together, the way sisters do. We would not pursue anything legal. Not because it wasn't deserved. The truth of what happened to our mother, to us, was ugly and real. But because dragging it through courts would only keep us inside that story. And we had already spent our whole lives inside stories we had not written. Instead, we wrote Victor one letter. Not angry, not vengeful, just honest. We told him what his father had done. We told him he had the right to know what his family's legacy really contained. And then we sealed it, sent it, and let it go. We never received a reply. 6 months later, through someone in the industry, I heard that Victor had quietly donated a significant amount to a foundation that supports children in the care system. No press conference, no announcement. Just a transfer and silence. I do not know for certain that our letter caused it. I chose to believe it did. I chose to believe that somewhere in him, something opened. That was enough for me. 1 year after I walked out of Victor's kitchen with one suitcase and my grandmother's ring, I was walking through Renata's vineyard at sunrise with flour on my hands and a glass of wine I had not yet earned. We had launched a line of pastry and wine pairing boxes, a small idea born at her dinner table on my 3rd night in Porto. Renata's wines. My recipes. A product that tasted exactly like what it was. 2 halves of the same person, finally working together. Food journalists called it the most personal collaboration in Portuguese gastronomy. I called it breakfast. Mrs. Petra flew out for the lunch. We sat her in the middle of the vineyard with a plate of walnut rolls and a glass of port wine, and she looked around slowly. The hills, the vines, the stone buildings glowing in the late afternoon light, and she said in that thick Bosnian accent of hers, "I always knew this girl was going somewhere. I just didn't know it would be this far." I laughed until I cried. I seem to be doing a lot of that lately. But for the first time, it was the right kind of crying. The divorce did not break me. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I think we have all been taught somewhere, quietly, that divorce is failure, that leaving is weakness, that starting over means you have lost. But I walked out of that kitchen with nothing, and what came next was everything. Not because the universe rewarded me with a sister and a vineyard and a number in a bank account that still does not feel real, but because the moment I stopped shrinking myself to fit inside someone else's story, there was finally enough room for my real one to begin. Losing the life you thought you wanted is terrifying. I know that. I lived it. But sometimes, it is the only way to find the life that was always yours. The pen Victor handed me to sign those papers, I kept it. It sits on my desk in the bakery, not as a reminder of him, as a reminder that I was the one who used it. I made the choice. I signed my name to the end of something, and in doing so, I signed my name to the beginning of something I could never have imagined.
Sometimes the end of the story you thought you were living is just the cover of the real one. And the real one, it starts with a pen, a piece of paper, and the quiet courage to walk out the door. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs to hear that their hardest moment might just be their turning point. Subscribe, because every single week I bring you a true story you have never heard, told the way it deserves to be. I'll see you in the next one.